Well, hello guys, I hope you're doing good, and for today's video, I'm so excited because I have wanted to do this video for so long, which is to show you guys the books that have changed my life. So I feel like I've always been a fairly big reader, like especially when I moved to Canada. I remember that watching television and reading a lot of books was what really helped me learn English faster. But of course, as I've gotten older, I have felt a bit into the usual trap that I think a lot of adults do, where you just read a lot less. Like, yes, you're reading articles on the internet and maybe some magazines or newspapers, but I don't feel it's quite the same as reading a book. So something that has greatly helped me in the last 3-4 years, I think is when I started really discovering it, is audiobooks. Maybe it's just me, but I find that I absorb information so much better when I am listening to it, and somehow it's much more convenient. I do have an Audible subscription, which I think is the best sort of platform to listen to audiobooks. So I actually have a link for you guys that will get you your first month free, one free audiobook that you can have forever for free. I will link that down below if you guys are interested, because I started up with just the free trial when I first started, and now I'm absolutely hooked. So as you guys can see, I have my Audible app open with all of my favorite audiobooks, so I'll kind of be referencing from the list that I have here, and then I also have some retro physical copy books. But starting with my number one favorite at the top of my list, I even got a tattoo because of it. It is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. So I know I've probably talked about this book many times on my channel, but for those that don't know and have never heard of this book, I guess you could kind of put it in the category of the New Age spirituality sort of grouping, but I feel like it goes on such a deeper level than just that. Like, it has really become my guide to everyday living and answers so many questions about psychology, about why things happen in our world the way they do, and also how to cultivate that consciousness that begins the separation between your source and your thoughts. And in second place, I do have to mention A New Earth, which is the second book that Eckhart Tolle wrote that got international success. And funny enough, I actually read A New Earth before I read The Power of Now, because I think I initially found A New Earth at like a garage sale back in Saskatchewan, like decades ago, and I just bought it, didn't really think anything of it. I think I saw it on Oprah, but I didn't actually read it until about 3 years ago. And if you guys have been with me for that long, you'll know that 3 years ago I went on a really life-changing trip back to Japan and some other travels around Europe, and I read that book right before I went on that trip and throughout my trip, and it just was completely transformational from the inside out. And I feel like that book basically guided me as I was on that trip and having so many intense things happen. So I truly do believe that books will find you when you're ready to consume them. And basically from that point on, both The Power of Now and A New Earth have changed my life in the best way. I'm not going to go into great detail about what A New Earth is about. I feel like you should read The Power of Now first, and if that resonates with you, then you can move on to A New Earth. Now, the next group of books that I would recommend right at the top here, the first one is The Vortex by Esther and Jerry Hicks, otherwise known as Abraham Hicks. They also have another one that I really like here. Where is it? This one right here, Money and the Law of Attraction, also by Abraham Hicks. That one obviously deals primarily with money and abundance, whereas The Vortex, I feel, is more or less about relationships. But it's interesting because I feel like The Vortex really is the best guide, as far as I found, about understanding the law of attraction and also about how we create our realities with our energy. I know a lot of people really like The Secret. That's probably the most famous sort of book and movie about the subject. For those of you who don't know, The Secret actually came about because the woman who wrote it went on a seminar of Esther and Jerry Hicks, who are like the channelers of Abraham Hicks. So if you are somebody who's kind of dabbled in understanding the law of attraction but feel it's kind of not tangible, I feel like reading Abraham Hicks might give you some more clarity on the subject, and I found it super useful in my everyday life, so I would highly recommend anything by Abraham Hicks. Now, the next book that I would greatly recommend is You Are a Badass at Making Money by Jen Sincero. I think that's how you say her name. That book was incredible. I am on this journey right now of changing my financial reality, and it has been working. I'm so happy about that. And I felt like her book was not only so funny and so relatable, like she is just such a great writer where you feel like she's actually having a conversation with you, especially if you get the Audible audiobook. But I just got her other book, which is You Are a Badass: How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life. I believe she has another one called You Are a Badass Every Day. And don't let the title being, slightly cheesy kind of fool you. These books are actually so powerful and so deep, and like I said, are very relatable. Now, if you are the type of person who is a bit overwhelmed by the whole spirituality and self-improvement kind of texts that are a bit word heavy and are, a bit hard to understand if you're just getting into it, I would highly recommend her books, because anybody can, get the gist of what she's saying and probably see themselves in her story. So I have been greatly enjoying her books. They have really helped me in my life, so I definitely recommend Jen Sincero. Now, the next book we have is not directly spirituality or self-development. It's actually a bit more of a story, which is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, because it is a very powerful, interesting sort of, well, I don't want to call it fairy tale, but kind of epic adventure type of tale about a man who kind of goes on his heart's desire quest and learns about the secrets of the universe and explain things in a very metaphorical sort of way. So I know Paulo Coelho has a lot of really famous books and is a really famous and established author, so I'm sure all of his works are really great, but I personally love The Alchemist. Now, the next book that I have is my first physical copy book, which is Wasted by Maria Hornbacher. This was a really important book for me in my teens because, as some of you know, I had anorexia for basically the decade of my teens, and obviously I was aware that's something I was dealing with, but as somebody who suffers from it in twisted ways, you actually don't want to not have it. Like, you're scared to actually get well and eat healthy and just basically be a normal person again. So this book was very famous in that whole community, because in a twisted way there are communities of people who actually like egg each other on in the disorder. So that book was really well known in that community, and that's how I found out about it. And it was really messed up because not only is it such a dark and twisted book, because it is a memoir, it is, Maria Hornbacher's story of what she went through for so long. So what actually ended up happening when I first read it is that it actually sent me even deeper into my eating disorder. Like, it was actually very triggering, which is why I would say that if you actually have an eating disorder, maybe, I'm not sure if it would be actually the best book for you. I would actually greatly recommend it for anyone who is the friend or a parent, any kind of family member of somebody who has an eating disorder, because I feel like that gives the most in-depth explanation of what that person is actually going through, that medical textbooks or psychology sort of accounts just don't quite get right. Like, you actually have to hear it from a first person perspective. So having said that, the first time I read it, it really triggered me. I actually ended up reading it multiple times, like 2, 3, 4 times probably. And the more I read it, the more I finally realized like how fucked up it was, what was happening, and that I didn't want to live my life this way anymore. So yeah, I would greatly recommend this book for anyone who wants to understand eating disorders on a deeper level from a first-person account. I think it is by far one of the best books out there. Another physical copy book that, as you guys can see, I was a very big fan of, and funny enough, like, Charles Bukowski came to me when I was in my teens, which seems like a strange author to read as like a small town teenage girl reading this like crusty, crazy old man's poetry, because I will say that I much prefer Charles Bukowski's poetry than I ever liked any of his books, which I've read quite a few of them as well. His poetry, which in this book is a compilation of all of his poetry called The Pleasures of the Damned, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. I actually loved to write poetry when I was younger and actually wanted to be a writer back then. So Charles Bukowski was actually a huge, huge sort of influence on me because I loved his style, which many people have now copied, but there is something so raw, so honest, and so funny about the way he writes. So I'm a huge Charles Bukowski fan. Next up, a very honorable mention is You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. Louise Hay is basically like the godmother of affirmations and of healing your body from the inside out, and I think that her work is absolutely beautiful. If you are somebody who has very low self-esteem or really has a bad opinion of yourself, I think her work can really turn that around for you and help you see yourself and the way that you're creating your reality in a different light. Basically, that's kind of the way that all of these books have changed my life, because a lot of them really show you a mirror of yourself and how your beliefs and how your subconscious beliefs especially are influencing your day-to-day life, and how that is then creating your physical reality. So Louise Hay is a great example of somebody that has gone through intense trauma, had an insanely hard childhood, and has come out of it to be such a beautiful person who has helped so many people. So Louise Hay is definitely one of my favorite spiritual teachers. And on the topic of healing your life, we also have Dr. JoeDispenza. I feel like he's getting much more famous now. I hear a lot of people talking about him, but I came across his books probably about 2 years ago, and the first one that I read was You Are the Placebo, which is incredible when you hear about all these medical trials of people literally thinking themselves to have huge changes in their life and having it become real. But I didn't actually know that he had a book before that, which I just recently finished reading, which is Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, and I guess he wrote that one before You Are the Placebo, so I'd probably recommend starting with that one and then going to You Are the Placebo. But yeah, it's just crazy actually how real the placebo effect is. So if you're looking for something from a more medical sort of standpoint, I'd recommend him. Emergence by Derek Riddle, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. This book, I was walking down Bloor Street and going somewhere, but something just was pulling me into Winners, and Winners usually can pull me anytime, but like something primarily was pulling me into the book section at Winners, and I'm just kind of looking at the books thinking, why am I here? Like, what am I looking for? Like, I don't need any new books. And as soon as I saw this book, I knew that that's what I had come here for. It gives a very clear step-by-step sort of guide if you are looking to change your life and need to identify what your subconscious beliefs are, what your blocks are, and then to clarify what it is you want, how you're going to change it. Because a lot of times, you know, you can just listen to an audiobook and think, oh, well, you know, that's all well and good, but how do I actually put it into practice? How do I actually, you know, use this in my own day-to-day life? I think he did a really great job of outlining that, and I would recommend getting this in a paperback sort of copy, because then you can actually use it as a workbook and kind of write things down as you go. And last, but certainly not least, my final book is one that I feel is actually gaining quite a bit of prominence even outside of the self-development and spirituality sort of community. I've heard lots of people talking about it. I can say that for sure it has changed my life. I read it about 2 years ago, have probably listened to it 5 times ever since, and I actually remember the first time especially that I read it, I'd be like walking somewhere or be doing something, and all of a sudden something that he would say, because he paints things in such a good picture and such a relatable picture, that I would just like stop and be like, whoa, holy crap, that just blew my mind. I never looked at it that way. And it just has that kind of effect on you. So the book is An Untethered Soul by Michael A. Singer, and he's also been on Oprah, is, you know, very well known in the whole spirituality kind of community. And he has another book that was actually after the An Untethered Soul, which is The Surrender Experiment, which is more or less his own personal story of how he came to these experiences, how he got this kind of knowledge, and his own sort of life experience. So even though it was published after, it's kind of before An Untethered Soul. So both books are really good, but I personally would by far recommend An Untethered Soul for those that are only going to get one book. It is so powerful. It paints the world in a totally different way than we conventionally are taught to see it. And it also gives you a lot of hope that you, once again, don't really have to worry so much, that you have everything you need, all the intelligence you need already inside of you, and it's just a matter of tapping into that and understanding how it is that you are creating this reality. So I know that all the books that I mentioned here today are obviously on the same sort of theme, but they have all changed my life. Like, even though a lot of them are talking about similar types of things, it's what I had mentioned before, where it's just about how the author or the person talking about the topic presents it, right? It's like we all take in information differently, and different examples give us different kinds of clarity. So all of these books have been incredibly helpful to me. I would recommend them all. And if you guys would like to get one of these books for free, I will leave the Audible link for a free audiobook for your first 30 days. If it's not your thing, you can just cancel it. You won't be charged anything, but I personally love Audible. It has been so helpful for me to actually be able to read and consume new books instead of sitting down and having to physically read one. So I will link that down below. Let me know what you guys think. But other than that, I hope you're having an amazing day. Keep being your own kind of beautiful, and I will see you soon. Bye, guys.